As we continue to get to know the Denver Broncos rookie class for the 2022 NFL season, our focus shifts to Greg Dulcich, the Broncos' newest addition at tight end. Get to know the player, get to know the person, and we project his fit in the Broncos offense in 2022, all on today's brand new Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. I cover the Denver Broncos as Mile High Sports Broncos beat reporter. Sayre Bedinger covers the Broncos for predominantlyorange.com. Make sure you check out those sites, check out all the action as well. And thank you, Broncos country, for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform or here on YouTube. Make sure you do us a favor, hit that subscribe, that follow button, smash that like button in the meantime so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. And we just surpassed Sayre, 7,000 subscribers here on YouTube. You know what that means? We're going to be doing a giveaway here shortly for a Broncos hat. We're going to pick out a hat, and we're going to pick one lucky viewer, subscriber here of the show to be able to win one. We're very excited about that. But, Sayre, we continue our Get to Know the Broncos rookie series on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, and Greg Dulcich becomes our focus here today. Let's get to know Dulcich as the person before we get into the player side.
Let's get to know Greg Dulcich, and congrats, Cody, on 7,000 subscribers. I mean, you built this show basically from the ground up. So, I mean, thanks for having me be part of it. I love
you've
being
been
part
monumental
of it.
in this, brother. Yeah,
Dude,
I was gonna say, I don't want all the credit, man. A lot is what you've been able to add to it. You know, like I said, very grateful. I think Broncos country, like I said, I'm fortunate enough to have Sayre Bedinger as my co-host because he brings a lot to the table on the show. So, Sayre, I will not let you minimize your impact here on the show. This has been a big part of you, my friend, but spot on there. Let's get to know Greg Dulcich now, the person. Now, for him, he's a California guy. And I think, like, you know, when you look at his hair, probably makes a little bit of sense. Like, he's got this whole surfer dude dilemma. And I know the first thing that Broncos fans thought, I hope when the rookie stuff comes up in the locker room that there is no way that they make him shave his hair, which rightfully so. I hope that is not the case. I know Vic Fangio done away with that when he became the head coach. No more shaving of the hair for rookies. It was kind of considered a hazing thing there. Dulcich, so it's like, who would ever want to touch the hair? That, like, the hair is immaculate. And he's a guy, obviously a native out of Glendale, California. And interesting enough, he wasn't always a tight end, Sayre. What position did he play in high school, and what was his journey from high school to college? And then we'll get into the NFL side afterwards.
Yeah, really interesting journey for Greg Dulcich, as really with every prospect, right? I mean, he was a quarterback in high school, and a lot of times you will see that from so many of these prospects that make it to the NFL. Like, you want to have your best player get the ball in their hands every play. So a lot of these guys, regardless of where they end up in the NFL, a lot of times will play quarterback in the high school at the high school level, which Greg Dulcich did before transitioning his final year at high school to the tight end position, where he really thrived. But he had just made the transition. He was only 210, 215 pounds. So he didn't get not a single FBS offer coming out of high school, Cody, which for the 80th overall pick in the draft, it just speaks to his work ethic, his work habits. But really awesome to see that, you know, he's come from the ground up. His high school coach went to UCLA, just like George Payton, just like Roman Pfeiffer, another personnel member for the Denver Broncos. They all went to UCLA, and his high school coach, Greg Dulcich's high school coach, actually got him preferred walk-on status at UCLA, where he came in, again, as a very small tight end prospect. But, man, he really grew into his own. And I think that this is the cool thing about him, Cody, is that you love seeing those heartwarming stories where guys get surprised with a scholarship, you know, walk-ons that get surprised with scholarships. Well, in March 2020, on his 20th birthday, Greg Dulcich actually just got his scholarship. That wasn't even hardly 2 years ago. He just became a scholarship athlete at UCLA, and here he is now, a potential starting tight end in the NFL in the next year or two. Really cool to see his journey from high school to the college ranks and how he really came about.
Well, and he was also an academic All-American too. And for a guy who takes his studies very seriously, I think that's something that a lot of NFL executives look into, Sarah, because they want to see, will this guy put in the time to learn the playbook, study the playbook? And as Nathaniel Hackett has mentioned, this Denver Broncos offense this season, the playbook is very large according to what he had told us in some media scrums there. So for him, he's probably been ingrained in it as is. And obviously there will be some dates coming up, rookie mini camp, and obviously the mandatory stuff that'll be coming up as well. They do have a lot of things that they're going to be taking a look at for Dulcich, right? For him, I think obviously strength, building some more strength will be a key for him. But Sarah, part of me believes that as we get ready to talk about him as the football player, we'll be able to see what type of skill set that he has, which translates well to why the Broncos offense and why George Payton selected him in the first place. I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to get to know Greg Dulcich, the person, even more up close and personal during Broncos practice, training camp, and even throughout the season to see how he evolves for this Denver team and how he evolves as a young adult. I mean, he's still a young guy at this point, sir. So you love all the build and all the potential that is there for him. And we'll talk about getting to know the player, Greg Dulcich, coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's a good friends over there at Blue Nile, and BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom, and you can shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, and gemstone pendant necklaces at BlueNile.com. And celebrating the special women in your life, well, guess what? BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate thousands of fine jewelry options at every price point possible. And this Mother's Day, give mom something that she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. Once again, that's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, it ships free, and it arrives in discreet packaging so it doesn't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. As we jump into the second half action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Once again, Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Please, in the meantime, if you're watching this here on YouTube, smash that like button and make sure you're following and subscribing to the show so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content coverage every single day, all year long. We appreciate all the interaction we get in the YouTube comment section or on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But Sayre, we got to know Greg Dulcich, the person, a little bit in the last segment here. Now let's get to know the football player. Now for him, what has been an area that's been missing for this Denver Broncos team, specifically from tight ends in the last 2 years from a consistency presence? In your opinion, where is an area that Denver needed, and why does Greg Dulcich maybe potentially add the element where they can address that in this upcoming season for the Broncos?
Well, I think in this draft and maybe the last couple of drafts, you've had a couple of really good vertical threats at the tight end position. Obviously, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons now, he comes to mind coming out of Florida, just a tremendous vertical threat at the tight end position. But Greg Dulcich is up there, Cody, among the guys that I've watched over the last few years, just as a pure vertical receiving threat. And yes, he can do a lot of other things really well. But man, when UCLA needed a big play, they just throw it to Greg Dulcich. He averaged almost 21 yards a catch in his first full season as a starter, and then ended up averaging over 17 yards a catch in total based off of 2 seasons of work. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy for a tight end to gain that many yards per reception. You don't see that very often, even from college guys. Like a typical average for the tight end position is going to be somewhere between 10, maybe on the high end, you're looking at 14 or 15 yards a catch. So for this guy to average over 17 yards a catch, and you see that on tape, you don't see just somebody that's he's constantly making these short yardage gains or working back to the football like we saw Broncos tight ends doing last year. And he's not going to set the track on fire, Cody. Like we've seen tight ends like Kyle Pitts again running the 4.4 something, whatever he ran last year. I mean, that's not Greg Dulcich's game, but he's much faster than I think he appears or than it looks like when you're just watching him play. He's deceptively fast. He's got really good acceleration and build up speed. And I think the one thing that I noticed after watching a handful of his games after the Broncos drafted him, just seeing kind of the way that UCLA utilized him, Cody, one of the things that I love about what he brings to the table is because he is such a legitimate vertical threat, he was able to get 15 yards upfield and then kind of cut back and sit down and really just wait for the ball. He pressed the defensive backs vertically enough to the point that they had to respect his vertical speed. And then he just does those deep comeback routes and those type of things, the deep crossers. I really like what he brings to the table as a vertical threat, but that's not all that he can do. I mean, in traffic, he's got strong hands as well.
Well, that's one point too. He's got strong hands. He's a natural pass catcher. He focuses on catching the football, which I know for Broncos tight ends, like I know for Noah Fant, like his rookie season, I think that's where a lot of Broncos fans were frustrated because they were like, hey, Noah Fant, he's not catching the ball. Like he struggled with some drops there. But as we know, Sarah, and I think this is the thing where Broncos fans are frustrated about the tight end position in general, why the Broncos selected him is like, oh, well, and I didn't believe in the positional value at this point in time. It's like, we don't know how this is going to pan out for Denver. So I don't think we can talk about positional value when the reality is Denver does need a pass catching tight end opposite Albert O. And maybe it could have been an Andrew Beck, but it's like you're getting a guy that does, like you mentioned, he has deceptive speed. And one thing he said in his post draft press conference, that one thing I really liked about him, he was asked about his speed. And he says, well, for me, he's like, I believe I'm fast. If you look at the tape shows you that I'm fast and I believe in myself and I believe in my long speed. So that the Broncos don't need a guy that can run a 4.4. They need a guy that can catch the football and make plays, move the chains on third down. And I do believe, like, you go back to a 17.6 yard per reception average at UCLA. I mean, this is a guy that has shown continuous growth year after year since coming on as a walk-on at UCLA. So for the fact that he walked on as a preferred walk-on and balled out and then eventually earned a scholarship, I think it says everything you need to know about Greg Dulcich. And obviously there's various people. Daniel Jeremiah had him listed as tight end number 1 in his big board process coming into the NFL draft. I'm stoked about this, but also as well, he can play anywhere. He can play inline if you want him to. You can match him up inside the slot. You can match him up on the outside as well. And we talk about utilization. We envision a lot, and I've been seeing some comparisons. You put out a tweet on Twitter, which I thought was great, and you're like, opposing teams' fans are going to be very mad when they say, why can't we cover this guy when referring to Greg Dulcich? Because he always finds ways to get open. And Sayre, I mean, at the NFL level, that is so key. But then there's also the narrative, well, Russell Wilson doesn't utilize where do people get this lazy ass analysis, Sayre? Like, if you actually watch and you put into factors, remember a game in 2018 when the Broncos played against the Seahawks? Russell Wilson found Will Disley for like 3 catches for 105 yards against Denver, downfield too, testing it. So I never want to hear that narrative. I think context and environment and situation apply. And it seems like the Broncos plan to spread the offense out a little bit here with Dulcich.
Yeah, and that narrative about Russell Wilson not utilizing tight ends. I mean, I guess Gerald Everett and Will Disley's, bank accounts would disagree with that quite a bit because Will Disley's getting $8 million a year from the Seattle Seahawks, and then I can't remember exactly what Gerald Everett signed with the Los Angeles Chargers for, but it wasn't chump change. So, and those
No.
guys were on the same team last year. So, I think that's a bunch of bull, and I don't buy it. So, I think Russell Wilson, he finds open receivers, and yes, he may heavily target receivers, but man, he's going to have some good tight ends in Denver to get the ball to. And I was clamoring, Cody, before the draft. I'm like, let's get a receiver, let's get a receiver, let's get a receiver. It's just a good investment. And I know that technically Greg Dulcich is a tight end, but man, I can't help but think I was at least partially right on that. I'm willing to take the L. They didn't take a wide receiver, but I was partially right in the fact that Greg Dulcich, Cody, he's such a dynamic big slot. You watch him run routes from the slot, he moves like a wide receiver. And I'm not trying to pump him up with hyperbole. Of course, he was the 80th overall pick in the draft. We're not talking about a top 10 selection here, but there's a lot of parallels in his game to Travis Kelce. And I'm not just trying to throw names out there. We talk about like Nick Bonito, and of course Von Miller's name comes up, and now we're talking about Greg Dulcich, and we're talking about Travis Kelce as a comparison. I'm not saying that Nick Bonito is Von Miller. I'm not saying that Greg Dulcich is Travis Kelce. But what I am saying is that you can see a lot of similarities in their game. You talked about the tweet that I put out there. Like, I think every time the Broncos play the Chiefs, we're all wondering, like, why is nobody covering Travis Kelce? Like, why is he always wide open?
Yeah.
Why is he always running free on scramble drill? I feel like Greg Dulcich is going to be able to do a lot of those similar things, but more so than just getting open on scramble drill. You see how Greg Dulcich is able to shake free from slot defenders with some pretty nifty moves as a slot route runner. I mean, he's just very dynamic in his movements for a big man. And he's got that. I mean, he was 215 pounds coming out of high school, remember? So he's still got that in him. It's kind of like if a point guard, like, sprouts up to 6'8" or 6'9", but they can still handle the ball and they can still kind of make you miss in the open court or whatever in basketball. But Greg Dulcich is similar. I mean, he's a bigger guy now, but he's still got the ability to do things that he would be able to if he was 40 pounds lighter, which makes him a dynamic threat as a big slot. So, yes, the Broncos did not draft a wide receiver, but at the same time, I think that the primary role, and we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, I think his primary role as a big slot in the NFL, he is going to be a dynamic threat moving forward.
Well, how might we project his potential in 2022 as a rookie in this Denver Broncos newly installed offense with Russell Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett? We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But Broncos country, before we do that, let me tell you about Built Bar, the other sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market today. It is the walk-on underdog favorite that earns a scholarship like Greg Dulcich, and Built Bar contains 9 amazing original flavors, plus the occasional limited time flavor and the newly acquainted 3-flavor granola bar series launched at Built.com. And Built is great if you need a little bit of an extra push throughout your day. Each bar contains 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. And I want you to head to Built.com here today and get a box for you or your family, whatever flavor your heart desires, or you can get a mix box with all the flavors in one, so you can find one that best suits you and your family's taste buds. And when you go to checkout, make sure you use promo code LOCK15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos will be projecting the fit for Greg Dulcich in the Broncos offense here as a rookie in 2022. But before we do that, really quick, mile high salute to everybody in Broncos country. Thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, my friend, we were talking a little bit previously about maybe how he might be used in the National Football League. For Greg Dulcich in this Broncos offense that already has Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, and a multitude of other guys who could contribute. Andrew Beck, who's been slated to play that hybrid fullback, H-back tight end role there. How might we be able to see Greg Dulcich utilized in Denver? You mentioned a lot about big slot. Let's expand on that a little bit more.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's the primary area that we're going to see him this coming year. You remember the famous clip from last year, Cody, where Courtland Sutton was playing the inline tight end role in Pat Shurmur's offense. I think that's a perfect example of the opposite of what we're going to see from the Denver Broncos under Nathaniel Hackett. In terms of what I mean is that these players are going to be playing to their strengths. And I think that the Broncos are going to ask Albert O to really step into that more traditional Y tight end role this season, where he's playing the majority of his snaps in line. And yes, I believe that they'll also be able to flex him out. But I think Greg Dulcich's arrival to me indicates that he's going to be the primary big slot for the Broncos. They obviously signed Eric Tomlinson in free agency. You bring him in to kind of be a blocking specialist. Then you've got, like you said, Andrew Beck, who can be sort of that move tight end, who can move around the formation, play some fullback, be a more primary blocker for you. And then Albert O, who is kind of underrated in his blocking in my I don't think he gets quite enough credit. He's not the best blocker, but not
Yeah,
terrible.
he's underrated there, I would say.
Definitely. So I think that's where Greg Dulcich comes into play as the big slot. And you put him out there with Albert O at the same time. I think a lot of times we'll see 12 personnel from the Broncos where they're not necessarily utilizing Dulcich, as a primary blocker, but as a big slot. I mean, you could really justify him going out there and blocking defensive backs, right? Or sealing off the edge, just crashing down as a big slot and really sealing off the edge on an outside zone play. So I think that there's plenty of opportunities for the Broncos to get him involved early on that really suit his skill set, rather than say, hey, you're a tight end, you need to go play the traditional tight end role. And that's just how it is. I don't think that we're going to see that, Cody. I think we're going to see a lot more of him splitting out.
Well, mentioned earlier too, deep crossing patterns, which I think the Broncos will use a lot more of, considering Russell Wilson and the utilization of play action. So for him being able to maybe be that inline guy, or being in the slot lined up in there and then taking off at depth and at 5 to 7 yards, bending it and then climbing and then getting across the field, the way that the Broncos have been attacked by opposing teams in the past there, I think Dulcich offers that value here to this Broncos team offensively, especially being a guy who can stretch the field. I mean, I just imagine right now now. I can see it. Fake handoff to either Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, play action, roll out to the right, and then he's on the left side coming all the way across the field. That's what the Broncos offense was doing early on in 2020, and they were having success. They went away from that in 2021 with Teddy Bridgewater, and maybe they can find a little bit new of a nest egg here with Greg Dulcich as well. But, Sayre, what is an area that the Broncos have to improve on offensively? We talk about the red zone. We think he's going to help out there, but there's another area of the field that we both feel like he can offer a lot of value from, maybe even being able to find soft spots against zone coverage, being able to beat man coverage, and being able to do something like moving the chains.
That's right. That's right. I think he's going to be a big time drive extender. The Broncos have a big third down situation. I think that Greg Dulcich is going to be a guy that, again, he just drives teams crazy because, oh, here it is, 3rd and 12 or 3rd and 13 for whatever reason. And all of a sudden, Greg Dulcich just pops wide open on a crossing route. And you're like, why did nobody cover this guy? That's exactly the role that I envision for him in this offense, because all the attention is going to be on other people. And if it's not, then you got plenty of easy completions to Sutton and Patrick and Judy and Hamler. I mean, this, with the attention and focus not necessarily being completely on Dulcich, but him being such a reliable target on third down, I see him, Cody, as the ideal drive starter and drive extender. There's not a ton of videos of him out there just mossing people in the end zone. He can still be a good red zone weapon, but he's not necessarily the type of guy that's going to come out there and just moss every single play. And by that I mean go up and win those 50-50 balls and just dominate at the catch point. But what I do think is that, hey, you just return a kickoff. Okay, you're at the 24, 25-yard line. Greg Dulcich breaks free for a 20-yard gain on the first play of the drive. I think that's exactly what he brings to the table. He's a drive starter and he's a drive extender. You know that you're going to be able to rely on him when you throw him the ball. And you know that when he's out on the field, he's going to find a way to get open. Those are two things that really add an extra dynamic to your offense that makes you just borderline impossible to defend.
Well, Broncos country, how do you feel about Greg Dulcich, the newest addition in the tight end room for this Denver Broncos football team out of UCLA? How might you project him to fit in with Russell Wilson, who's already been on the phone, who's already FaceTimed him several times, and these guys are looking forward to getting together, getting to work, and Russ is going to be a very monumental part in helping Dulcich, who's a very smart guy, get up to speed on the playbook, which could open up a whole nother realm of opportunities for this Denver Broncos offense going into the 2022 NFL season. On tomorrow's episode, Lockdown Broncos, Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we're going to continue our Get to Know series where we focus on Pitt cornerback Damari Mathis. Make sure you tune your dials in here to Lockdown Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcast or here on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and also, if you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, write a review, leave your Twitter handle in a review telling us why you love the show, and you'll be automatically entered into any future contest giveaway that we do. Our latest hat giveaway will be coming up here very shortly. Stay tuned on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos for more details with that. But with that said, that'll do it for today's episode of the show. We'll see you tomorrow, Broncos country, for a brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos.